Colonel James Harrison's phone's harsh ring shattered the silence of his Spartan apartment. The illuminated caller ID displayed General Mitchell, Pentagon, a name he hadn't seen in exactly 4 years. The Sentinel AI system has crashed, completely during a Chinese naval deployment in the Taiwan Strait, General Mitchell stated without preamble, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. We can't get reliable intelligence. Their fleet is in provocative positioning, and the White House is demanding answers. Your perfect machine failed, didn't it? Harrison said, already pulling his meticulously preserved dress uniform from the closet. Catastrophically, Mitchell admitted. Pentagon car will be there in 20 minutes. We need your expertise, James. Now, what would Harrison discover when he returned to the crisis center he once commanded, now ruled by the very technology that ended his career? Subscribe to our channel for more emotional redemption stories, and share your experiences with technological disruption in the comments below. Harrison remembered the day perfectly. April 17, 2021, the conference room had been filled with uniforms and suits, PowerPoint slides featuring the gleaming new Sentinel AI system. His objections had been met with thinly veiled contempt. "Colonel, you need to understand," Dr. Everett had said, his Silicon Valley confidence grading against Harrison's 30 years of military intelligence experience. Sentinel processes 10,000 data points per second. It doesn't get tired, emotional, or politically biased, and it doesn't understand human motivation, Harrison had countered. Technology isn't the problem, Doctor. It's treating it like it's infallible. General Mitchell had intervened then, a hand on Harrison's shoulder. "James, we've made our decision. The DoD is moving forward with Sentinel across all intelligence operations." 6 months later, Harrison stood at attention while they praised his service before effectively showing him the door. His security clearance was deactivated before he reached his car. The first year of civilian life had been the hardest. Elizabeth had tried to be supportive, but their marriage had been built around his career, his purpose. When that disappeared, so did their connection. The divorce was finalized 18 months after his retirement. He'd landed a position, teaching military history at Georgetown. His students saw him as a relic, fascinating but irrelevant, much like the Pentagon had. "The future of warfare is digital," one bright student had proclaimed during a debate on cyber warfare. "Human analysts are bottlenecks." Harrison had smiled, tightly, until the power goes out. He never spoke about Sentinel in class, though he followed its implementation closely through former colleagues. The AI system had been heralded as revolutionary, processing intelligence from satellites, communications intercepts, social media, and 1,000 other sources to predict geopolitical movements with supposedly unmatched precision. Harrison had kept a file of its errors, small at first, but growing. He'd sent reports through proper channels, only to receive form responses thanking him for his interest in national security. As the car approached the Pentagon, Harrison straightened his tie. 4 years of civilian clothes had made his uniform feel like a costume, but as the familiar weight settled on his shoulders, something else returned to purpose. The Pentagon's corridors hadn't changed, but the crisis center was unrecognizable. Where analysts' desks had once stood, sleek terminals displayed holographic data streams. In the center, a circular platform projected what Harrison assumed was Sentinel's interface, currently dark except for pulsing red error messages. "Colonel Harrison," a voice called Sergeant Maya Chen approached, her previously regulation-length hair now styled in an undercut. "I never thought I'd see you back here." "Makes 2 of us, Sergeant," Harrison said, genuinely pleased to see a familiar face. Chen had been one of his best analysts before the transition. "It's Lieutenant now," she corrected with a small smile. "They put me through officer training when I showed aptitude for the Sentinel systems." A young captain approached, his posture stiff. "Colonel Harrison, I'm Captain Reed. General Mitchell is on a call with Packham. He asked me to brief you." Reed led Harrison to a side room where several junior officers worked frantically at terminals. They barely looked up as Harrison entered, though he caught whispers of the tech dinosaur and analog intelligence. At 0100 hours, Sentinel began generating anomalous risk assessments regarding Chinese naval movements near Taiwan, Reed explained, bringing up satellite imagery on a screen. By 0230, the system had crashed completely. "We've been unable to restore core functions." The images showed a formation of Chinese vessels, destroyers, a carrier group, and support ships in international waters but uncomfortably close to Taiwan's maritime boundaries. "What was Sentinel's last assessment before failure?" Harrison asked. 87% probability of routine exercises, 12% show of force, 1% preparation for blockade. Reed recited. Harrison studied the positioning of the ships. And you believed that? Reed hesitated. Sentinel has been accurate in predicting Chinese naval movements with 98.7% reliability over the past 3 years. Sir, Lieutenant Chen interrupted. I requested your presence because something feels wrong about this deployment. The formation isn't consistent with their standard exercise protocols. Harrison nodded. Chen had always had good instincts. I need everything you have, raw intelligence, not Sentinel's interpretations, communications intercepts, satellite imagery, social media monitoring, diplomatic chatter. That's thousands of data points, Reed said, looking overwhelmed. That's why we built Sentinel in the first place. Then we'd better get started, Harrison replied. And I need paper maps. Actual, physical maps of the Taiwan Strait. The junior officers exchanged glances. Paper maps, one whispered. Welcome to the Stone Age, another muttered. But Chen was already moving. I know where to find them, sir, and I think I can pull the raw data feeds Sentinel was processing before it crashed. Harrison surveyed the room of young, skeptical faces. Lesson 1. Officers. Technology is a tool, not a replacement for thinking. Let's get to work. Dr. Adam Everett arrived 2 hours later, looking considerably less polished than when Harrison had last seen him. His designer glasses sat askew on his face, and his Stanford sweatshirt suggested he'd been summoned from sleep just like Harrison, Colonel. Everett acknowledged with a nod that fell short of an apology. Never thought they'd bring you back. Never thought your infallible system would fail, Harrison countered, keeping his voice neutral. What happened? Everett ran a hand through his disheveled hair. We're still diagnosing, but it appears Sentinel encountered a pattern it couldn't reconcile. The Chinese fleet movements followed standard exercise protocols, but certain communications didn't align with previous patterns. So it crashed because something didn't fit its models, Harrison asked. Oversimplification, but essentially correct. Everett admitted Sentinel is designed to learn from historical data. This particular configuration of vessels, combined with the communication patterns and several other factors, created what we call a black swan scenario. Harrison resisted the urge to say, I told you so. Lieutenant Chen approached with a tablet. Sir, I've compiled the last data Sentinel processed. Before failure, there's something odd about these intercepted communications. Harrison reviewed the translations from Mandarin, standard operational language, but with subtle inconsistencies. These aren't matching their movements, he noted. Almost as if they wanted their communications to be intercepted. Chen finished. Harrison nodded. Dr. Everett, before the crash, was Sentinel flagging these discrepancies? Everett frowned, reviewing the data. No, it was assessing them as noise statistical anomalies rather than meaningful patterns. Because they don't match historical patterns, Harrison concluded. That's the problem with relying solely on past data. It doesn't account for intentional deception. Captain Reed joined them, his expression grave. Packham reports Chinese vessels have begun new maneuvers. They're now in a blocking formation that could potentially restrict access to Taiwan's southern ports. What's the White House saying? Harrison asked. They're waiting for Sentinel's assessment before determining a response, Reed replied. Harrison exchanged glances with Chen. And when exactly will Sentinel be operational? Everett avoided eye contact. Best case, 8 hours for basic functions, full analytical capabilities, maybe 24 hours. In 24 hours, this situation could escalate beyond control, Harrison said. Dr. Everett, I need to know, is it possible the Chinese knew about Sentinel's limitations? Could this be a deliberate attempt to exploit a vulnerability in the system? But scientist silence was answer enough. Captain Reed, Harrison said, turning to the younger officer, assemble your team. Lieutenant Chen, get those paper maps ready. Dr. Everett, I need you to focus on retrieving whatever raw data Sentinel collected before crashing. What are you planning? Everett asked. We're going back to basics, Harrison replied. Human intelligence, analysis, the old way. General Mitchell won't authorize, Reed began. General Mitchell called me for a reason, Harrison interrupted. He knows what Sentinel can't do. Now it's time to show what humans can. Harrison commandeered a conference room adjacent to the crisis center. Within an hour, paper maps covered the walls, sticky notes marking vessel positions, and whiteboards filled with timelines and communication logs. The room looked like a relic from another era. Sir, with all due respect, how is this more efficient than digital analysis? Lieutenant Park asked. The young intelligence officer had reluctantly joined. Harrison's impromptu team at General Mitchell's insistence. "It's not about efficiency," Lieutenant Harrison replied, stepping back to survey the visual layout. "It's about perspective. Digital systems process linearly, the human brain makes connections spatially, but we're missing processing power," argued Captain Reed. "Sentinel can analyze thousands of variables simultaneously, and yet here we are," Harrison said dryly. He turned to the small team of junior officers Mitchell had assigned him. "Let's establish what we know versus what we're assuming. Facts on the blue cards, assumptions on the yellow." The exercise was painfully slow at first. These officers had been trained to input queries and receive Sentinel's probability assessments, not to draw their own conclusions. Most had never conducted raw intelligence analysis without AI assistance. "Lieutenant Chen, what patterns do you see in these communication intercepts?" Harrison asked, pointing to the transcripts they'd arranged chronologically. Chen studied them. "The timing is off. Messages about resupply operations came before their logistics vessels were in position." "Good. What does that suggest?" "That the communications are performative," she said, confidence growing. "They're following a script, not responding to actual conditions." Harrison nodded. "Captain Reed, what about the vessel positioning?" Reed hesitated, then approached the map. "They're in a standard blockade formation, but ... double quotes." He paused, studying the patterns. "The spacing is wrong, too wide to effectively prevent passage, like they want to look threatening without actually impeding traffic," Harrison suggested. "Exactly," Reed said, sounding surprised at his own insight. Harrison moved to the whiteboard. "So we have communications that don't match actions and a formation that appears threatening but isn't optimized for actual blockade. What are we missing?" For 2 hours, they dissected every piece of intelligence, building a comprehensive picture of the situation without Sentinel's algorithmic interpretations. Slowly, the junior officers began engaging more actively, their initial skepticism giving way to analytical thinking. Lieutenant Park, initially the most resistant, suddenly stood up. "Wait, these intercepted messages, they're using read specific to northern Chinese dialects, but the fleet commander is from Guangdong province in the south. Could be a translator," Reed suggested. "No, naval communications are standardized Mandarin," Park insisted. "This is deliberate. They want us to think these messages originate from a different command structure." Harrison smiled slightly. "Good catch, Lieutenant. This supports our theory of deliberate misdirection." A knock at the door interrupted them. General Mitchell entered, looking haggard. "James, the Secretary of Defense is demanding answers. The President is considering deploying the 7th Fleet as a counterpresence. What do you have for me?" Harrison gestured to their analog war room. "We believe the Chinese are deliberately creating confusion. The communications, positioning, timing its theater, not preparation for actual conflict." Mitchell frowned. "You're sure? Based on this," he waved at the paper maps, ... old school setup. "Not just based on methodology," Harrison replied. "Based on human understanding of human behavior. They're exploiting Sentinel's weakness, its inability to recognize deception that doesn't fit historical patterns." Mitchell considered this. "I need more than theories, James. I need evidence I can take to the Secretary." "Then give me 12 hours and direct access to our assets in the region," Harrison said. "Human assets, not just electronic surveillance." Mitchell hesitated, then nodded. "You have 6. While his team continued analyzing intelligence, Harrison pulled Lieutenant Chen aside. "I need to see Sentinel's performance logs," he said quietly. "Not just from today, from the past 6 months." Chen's expression shifted. "That would require significant clearance, which I've been temporarily granted," Harrison replied, showing her General Mitchell's authorization on his temporary badge. In a secluded office, Chen pulled up the system diagnostics. "These are restricted even within the Sentinel team," she explained. "Only Dr. Everett and 3 others have regular access." Harrison studied the logs, a growing sense of vindication mixing with alarm. "These error rates have been increasing steadily for months." "What?" Chen leaned closer. "That's not possible. We receive daily reports showing 98.7% accuracy. Look at these diagnostic alerts." Harrison pointed. "Pattern recognition failures, anomaly dismissals, confidence interval fluctuations. Sentinel has been degrading, but someone classified these warnings as routine system noise." Chen looked stunned. "Sir, if this is true, someone's been hiding Sentinel's deterioration," Harrison finished. "The question is why?" They were interrupted by a soft knock. Dr. Everett stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I thought I might find you here," he said, closing the door behind him. You're looking at the ghost files. You knew, Harrison said. Not a question. Everett sighed. Yes. Sentinel began encountering edge cases it couldn't reconcile about 7 months ago. Mostly minor unusual patterns in North Korean troop rotations, inconsistencies in Iranian naval communications, and instead of addressing it, you buried it, Harrison said, anger rising. You don't understand the pressure, Colonel, Everett replied. $12 billion in development, congressional oversight, defense contracts hinging on performance metrics. So you falsified the metrics. We curated the reports. Everett admitted. The core functions were still reliable for most scenarios. Most scenarios, Harrison repeated. Just not the ones that matter most when an adversary deliberately acts to confuse our systems. Which is exactly what you warned about 4 years ago, Everett acknowledged. Harrison stood, towering over the scientist. People are risking their lives based on your curated intelligence. Ships are being deployed. Decisions are being made. I know, Everett said quietly. That's why I asked General Mitchell to call you. Harrison paused. Mitchell said Sentinel's failure triggered the call. And who do you think informed him how serious that failure was? Everett countered. I've been reading your occasional analyses over the past 4 years. Your critiques of Sentinel's assessments. You were right more often than our algorithms. Harrison studied the scientist, reassessing him. You need to tell General Mitchell everything. He'd have my clearance, possibly more. Yes, Harrison agreed, and you'd deserve it. But right now, we need the truth more than we need scapegoats. Chen, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. Sir, there's something else in these logs. Access records from unusual terminals. IPs that don't match Pentagon protocols. Both men turned to her. Are you saying Sentinel was accessed externally? Harrison asked. Not just accessed, Chen said, her voice tense. These signatures match known Chinese cyber warfare units. Harrison and Everett exchanged glances. They didn't just anticipate Sentinel's failure, Harrison said. They caused it. Lieutenant David Park had graduated top of his class at West Point, with specialized training in AI-assisted intelligence operations. To him, Harrison's methods weren't just outdated, they were practically archaeological. Sir, I've analyzed these communication patterns using statistical modeling, Park reported, tablet in hand. There's a 92% correlation with standard plan naval exercises. Harrison looked up from the map he was studying. And that tells you what, exactly? Park hesitated. That ... The Chinese fleet is conducting exercises. Maybe, Harrison said. Or maybe they want us to think they're conducting exercises. Statistics can't tell you intent. Lieutenant, with respect, sir, pattern recognition is more reliable than hunches. Harrison straightened. Come with me, Lieutenant. A quiet corner, Harrison pulled out personnel files on the Chinese fleet commander, Admiral Zhao. What do you know about him? Harrison asked. Park recited. Factually, Admiral Lin Zhao, 58, commanding officer of the East Sea Fleet since 2022, previously South Sea Fleet, considered a moderate within the plan leadership. That's his biography, Harrison said, not who he is. In 2009, Zhao was a captain when his destroyer participated in a harassment campaign against the USNS Impeccable. But unlike his contemporaries, he advocated restraint. His political patron was later purged in President Xi's anti-corruption campaign. Zhao survived by becoming cautious methodical to the point of predictability. Park frowned. How is this relevant to the current deployment? Because Admiral Zhao doesn't improvise. He doesn't take political risks, so why is he now positioning his fleet in a provocative stance that could trigger international incident? Realization dawned slowly on Park's face. Because he's under orders he can't refuse, or Harrison prompted. Park thought harder, or ... He's creating an appearance of aggression while actually minimizing risk. The wide spacing Captain Reed noticed it's deliberate. Now you're thinking like an intelligence officer, Harrison said. Data tells you what is happening, understanding people tells you why. Over the next hours, Harrison watched Park's approach evolve. The lieutenant began asking different questions, looking beyond statistical correlations to human factors. By midnight, it was Park who noticed a crucial discrepancy in the communication logs. Sir, these coded transmissions, they're being sent on schedules matching previous exercises, but their content doesn't correlate with actual movements. Harrison nodded encouragingly. And that suggests they're broadcasting for our benefit. Park realized it's like they're running two operations simultaneously. One for our sensors to detect, another actually happening. Exactly now. What's the real operation? Park studied the maps. the vessel tracking data, the communication, logs not as isolated data points but as components of human decision. They single quotes testing us, he said slowly. Not preparing for action against Taiwan, but probing our response mechanisms. And specifically, Harrison pressed. Park's eyes widened. They're testing how we operate without Sentinel. This isn't about Taiwan at all. It's about understanding our contingency capabilities. Harrison smiled slightly. Not bad for 6 hours of archaeological methods. Park had the grace to look embarrassed. I still believe in data analytics, sir, as do I, Lieutenant. But data without context is just noise. Sentinel processes information, it doesn't understand it. Sir, Park said hesitantly, if this is a test of our non-Sentinel capabilities, then they must have known it would fail. Yes, Harrison agreed. The question is how they knew exactly when and how to push it past its breaking point. You think they have inside information? Harrison glanced toward where Dr. Everett was working. I think $12 billion creates a lot of pressure to succeed and a lot of vulnerabilities to exploit. By 0500, Harrison's team had compiled a comprehensive analysis that told a very different story than Sentinel's pre-crash assessment. The map room had evolved into an intricate web of connections, timelines, and hypotheses, looking more like a detective's investigation board than military intelligence. What we're seeing, Harrison explained to General Mitchell, who had returned, for an update, isn't preparation for aggression against Taiwan. It's a deliberate attempt to appear threatening while actually maintaining operational safety margins. Mitchell frowned. To what end? To test our response when Sentinel fails. Harrison said, they triggered the system crash, then positioned their fleet to create a crisis that would force us to fall back on traditional methods. You're suggesting this entire scenario is essentially a Chinese intelligence operation against our AI systems? Mitchell asked skeptically. Yes, Harrison confirmed. And it's working. The White House is paralyzed waiting for Sentinel's assessment. Our Pacific Fleet is preparing for potential confrontation. And media reports are already raising alarm about Chinese aggression. Mitchell paced the room, studying the evidence. Harrison's team had assembled this as circumstantial. James' intelligence always is, Harrison countered. But look at the pattern. Admiral Zhao's fleet is maintaining precisely the distance needed to trigger our strategic thresholds without crossing them. Their most aggressive maneuvers happen during our decision-making windows. They're choreographing this to maximize uncertainty. Lieutenant Park stepped forward. Sir, we've also identified a consistent 30-minute delay between Beijing's directives and fleet execution, longer than standard operational lag. It suggests Admiral Zhao is deliberately slowing implementation, to give us time to recognize that deception, Harrison added. Mitchell rubbed his temples. If you're right, this is sophisticated psychological warfare. It's classic Sun Tzu, Harrison said. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. They're mapping our decision processes, testing our reliance on Sentinel, and creating division between our technological and human intelligence capabilities. Dr. Everett, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. General, Colonel Harrison's assessment aligns with what we're seeing in Sentinel's partial recovery. The system is still generating high conflict probabilities because it can't process the intentional inconsistencies in Chinese communications. So what do you recommend? Mitchell asked Harrison. Stop waiting for Sentinel and publicly acknowledge we're evaluating the situation through multiple intelligence methods. Signal to Beijing that we recognize their operation for what it is, and that our response isn't dependent on AI assessments alone. Mitchell looked unconvinced. The Secretary of Defense has staked a lot on Sentinel. Admitting it failed is better than making strategic errors based on compromised intelligence. Harrison finished firmly. Sometimes leadership means acknowledging when your systems fail. The general's phone buzzed. He checked it and grimaced. The White House wants options on their desk in 1 hour. The president is considering a formal diplomatic protest and naval counterpositioning, which is exactly what the Chinese want, Harrison said urgently. It validates their assessment of our dependency on automated systems. Mitchell looked torn. I need something concrete, James, not just theories. Harrison exchanged glances with his team, then turned back to Mitchell. Give me direct access to Admiral Zhao's previous American counterparts, not reports actual conversations with the officers who've engaged with him personally. That's irregular. So is calling a retired colonel back to the Pentagon at 3 a.m., Harrison countered. Trust me, Mitchell, human insight is what we need right now, not more algorithms. After a moment of consideration, Mitchell nodded. You have 30 minutes. While Harrison made calls to retired admirals who had interacted with Zhao, Dr. Everett approached him with an expression of someone about to confess a sin. "Colonel, there's something you need to know about Sentinel," he said quietly, guiding Harrison to a private corner, something that wasn't in the specifications or congressional briefings. Harrison waited silently. Sentinel was never designed to detect deliberate deception, Everett admitted. We marketed it as capable of identifying all forms of misinformation and strategic deception, but the system has a fundamental limitation, which is, it can only recognize patterns it's seen before, Everett said. Novel forms of deception, especially those designed specifically to exploit its analytical methodology, effectively invisible. Harrison controlled his anger. "And you didn't think this was worth mentioning for years ago? We were confident we could solve it before deployment," Everett said, not meeting Harrison's eyes. "Then deadlines approached, budgets were scrutinized, and compromises were made. Compromises that put national security at risk," Harrison said coldly. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Everett insisted. "Silicon Valley operates on the ship now, patch later model. We thought we'd have time to refine the algorithms. The military isn't a smartphone app, Doctor. We don't get to push updates after lives are lost." Everett nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I know that now. That's why I've been quietly advocating for a hybrid approach integrating human intelligence oversight into Sentinel's architecture." Harrison's eyebrows rose. "You have, for the past year," Everett confirmed. "My proposals keep getting blocked by stakeholders who invested in the fully automated vision we initially sold." Harrison studied the scientist, re-evaluating him. "So what are you proposing now?" "A collaboration," Everett said. "Your human intelligence expertise combined with Sentinel's processing power, not as competitors, but as complementary systems. That's a significant redesign." "It is," Everett agreed. "But this crisis proves we need it. Sentinel can process vast amounts of data, but it needs human insight to interpret intent and recognize novel deception." Before Harrison could respond, Lieutenant Chen rushed over. "Sir, we've detected new communications from Admiral Zhao's flagship, uncoded in the clear." "What do they say?" Harrison asked. "It's a weather advisory," Chen reported, "warning all vessels in the region about an approaching storm system. They're adjusting positions to maintain safety distances." "A convenient excuse to de-escalate without losing face," Harrison noted. "The storm, real but moderate," Chen confirmed. "Not severe enough to necessitate the level of repositioning they're implementing." Harrison smiled slightly. "Admiral Zhao is giving us an opening. He's creating a non-political reason to reduce tensions." Dr. Everett looked confused. "How can you be sure?" "Because I just spoke with Admiral Jackson, who dealt with Zhao during joint exercises in 2019, Harrison explained. "He said, Zhao always builds in a face-saving exit strategy. The man hates brinkmanship." Harrison turned to Chen. "Have our satellites confirmed the weather system, then suggest to General Mitchell that we issue our own weather advisory and acknowledge the Chinese fleet's professional safety protocols in responding to changing conditions. A de-escalation disguised as routine naval procedure," Chen said, understanding immediately. "Exactly. It gives both sides room to step back without appearing to retreat." As Chen left to implement the plan, Everett watched Harrison with newfound respect. "That's the kind of strategic interpretation Sentinel could never manage," he admitted. "Not alone," Harrison agreed, "but with the right human partnership, we could build something genuinely revolutionary," Everett finished. "Not just better technology, but better intelligence." Harrison extended his hand. "I think we finally have something to agree on." The Pentagon's main briefing room was divided literally and figuratively. On one side stood Harrison and his makeshift team with their analog assessments. On the other, Sentinel's remaining engineers with their partial digital reconstructions. In the middle sat General Mitchell, the Secretary of Defense, and various military and civilian leaders. "Let me understand this clearly," Secretary Vance said, her tone skeptical. "Colonel Harrison, you're suggesting we ignore the pre-crash Sentinel assessment of Chinese naval intentions and instead rely on your traditional analysis." "I'm suggesting we integrate multiple intelligence methodologies rather than waiting for a compromised system to come back online," Harrison replied evenly. "Compromised?" The Secretary's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious allegation." Dr. Everett stepped forward. "Madam Secretary, preliminary forensics indicate Sentinel's architecture was indeed penetrated by external actors. While we can't yet confirm Chinese involvement, The timing and nature of the system failure strongly suggests targeted action. The room erupted in murmurs. Secretary Vance silenced them with a raised hand. General Mitchell, what's your assessment? Mitchell looked uncomfortable. Colonel Harrison's analysis provides a coherent alternative interpretation of Chinese movements. Given Sentinel's current status, I believe we should seriously consider his recommendations, which are: Harrison moved to the central display, acknowledge the weather system affecting the Taiwan Strait, express appreciation for PLAN's professional safety protocols in repositioning their fleet, signal that we're monitoring through multiple intelligence channels, emphasizing our non-dependence on any single system. That's it. The secretary looked unimpressed. No fleet deployments. No diplomatic protests. Correct, Harrison confirmed. Any escalatory response plays into their intelligence-gathering operation. They want to see how we function without Sentinel. Admiral Reeves, commander of Pacific Forces, spoke up. With respect, Colonel, if Chinese vessels are threatening Taiwan's maritime access, we have obligations to respond under regional security agreements. If they were actually threatening access, I'd agree, Harrison countered. But their position to suggest the possibility while carefully avoiding actions that would trigger automatic responses. Lieutenant Park stepped forward. Admiral, our analysis of planned vessel spacing shows they're maintaining 1.7 times the minimum distance required for effective blockade positioning. It's deliberately inefficient. Sentinel calculated a 64% probability of hostile intent before crashing, countered a young analyst from the AI team. Even our partial reconstructions show escalating risk metrics because Sentinel can't distinguish between appearance and intent, Harrison argued. It's processing the visible data without understanding the strategic context. The room divided again into murmured discussions. Secretary Vance consulted quietly with her advisors before addressing the group. We face two paths, she said. Wait for Sentinel's full restoration and respond according to its assessment, or implement Colonel Harrison's recommendation immediately. Both carry risks. Madam Secretary, Harrison said, there's a third option. Implement our recommendation as an interim measure while Sentinel is restored, but with modifications. Dr. Everett and I have discussed integrating human oversight into its analytical framework. Everett nodded. It's technically feasible. We could have a hybrid system operational within hours. Secretary Vance studied them both. You're proposing a fundamental change to a $12 billion system based on a single incident. I'm proposing we adapt to a demonstrated vulnerability before our adversaries exploit it further, Harrison replied. The secretary checked her watch. The president expects options in 15 minutes. General Mitchell, prepare both response scenarios for consideration. As the meeting dispersed, Mitchell approached Harrison. You just challenged the Pentagon's entire intelligence modernization strategy in front of the secretary. Sometimes the best service we can provide is telling uncomfortable truths. Harrison, replied Mitchell, almost smiled. I remember why I called you now. While Pentagon leadership deliberated, Lieutenant Chen sequestered herself with Sentinel's core logs. Something about the system failure pattern nagged at her. It was too precise, too targeted. Sir, she called, motioning Harrison over to her terminal. I think I've found something. Harrison leaned in, conscious of keeping their conversation private. What am I looking at? Sentinel's failsafe protocols, Chen explained. They're designed to maintain basic functionality even during catastrophic system errors. But look at this sequence. She highlighted a series of commands executed milliseconds before the system crash. These overrides shouldn't be possible without alpha-level authorization, she continued, but they were executed through a maintenance backdoor, one that was supposedly closed during final security certification. Harrison frowned. A backdoor left open deliberately. Or reopened, Chen suggested. The access signature matches an internal development server that should have been decommissioned when Sentinel went operational. Could it be an oversight? Chen shook her head. Not possible. Sentinel underwent 3 independent security audits. This particular vulnerability was flagged and supposedly addressed in all 3 reports. Harrison studied the logs more closely. These command strings, they're targeted specifically at Sentinel's pattern recognition modules for naval deployments. Exactly, Chen confirmed. This wasn't a general system attack. It was surgical, designed to disable precisely the functions needed to assess the current Chinese fleet movements. Who has access to this level of system architecture detail? That's the problem, Chen replied. Officially, only Dr. Everett and 2 senior engineers. But this backdoor access bypassed normal authentication logs. Harrison's expression darkened. So we can't identify who used it. Not directly, Chen agreed. But I found something else. She pulled up a different screen showing network traffic. Analyzes the backdoor was accessed through a complex proxy chain, but there's a consistent timing pattern in the data packets, meaning the commands were executed automatically by a program, not manually by a human operator, and the program has a distinctive signature I've seen before. Harrison waited. 3 months ago we detected a similar pattern during a security penetration test. It was flagged as a potential nation-state level threat, but the investigation was administratively closed 2 weeks later. Closed by whom? Chen hesitated. The order came from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Harrison straightened, processing the implications. Forward these logs to General Mitchell immediately, encrypted with his personal key only. Sir, if OSD was involved, we don't know that, Harrison interrupted. Administrative closure could mean many things, but Mitchell needs to see this before the president makes any decisions. As Chen prepared the secure transmission, Harrison contemplated the broader picture. If someone in the defense establishment had compromised Sentinel, whether through negligence, corruption, or coercion, the implications extended far beyond this single crisis. Lieutenant, he said quietly, make a separate copy of everything you've found. Secure it where only you can access it. Chen looked up, understanding the gravity of his request. Insurance. Harrison nodded. Just in case our analysis gets buried again. Dr. Everett approached, looking anxious. Any progress? Harrison made a split-second decision. Chen has identified the specific vulnerability that was exploited, a maintenance backdoor that should have been closed. He watched Everett carefully. For his reaction, the scientist paled visibly. That's not possible. I personally verified all backdoors were eliminated. Apparently not, Harrison replied. The question is, who knew about it and who had reason to exploit it? You can't think Everett began defensively. I think, Harrison interrupted, that we need to focus on the current crisis first, but, afterward, there will be a very thorough investigation. Everett nodded slowly. I want that too. My reputation, my life's work is tied to Sentinel's integrity. Then help us fix it, Harrison said. Not just the technical vulnerability, but the institutional one that allowed this to happen. After a moment's hesitation, Everett replied, I will. 24 hours after the initial call that had pulled Harrison from retirement, tension in the crisis center had reached a breaking point. The Chinese fleet maintained its provocative positioning, though they'd implemented the weather-related adjustments that provided a thin veneer of operational justification. The White House had authorized a limited response, a public acknowledgement of the weather conditions, and a statement that American forces were monitoring the situation through multiple intelligence channels. It was a compromise that incorporated elements of Harrison's recommendation while preserving the appearance of confidence in Pentagon systems. Harrison stood at the edge of the main floor, watching as the temporary hybrid system he and Everett had designed processed the latest intelligence. Lieutenant Park approached with a tablet. Sir Packham reports Chinese vessels are maintaining their adjusted positions. No further movement in the past 3 hours, and communication intercepts consistent with standard weather protocols, Park confirmed, but there's increased encrypted traffic between the fleet and Beijing. Harrison nodded. They're waiting for our next move. General Mitchell joined them, looking marginally less exhausted than he had hours earlier. James, the Secretary of Defense, wants your assessment. Are we past the crisis point? No, Harrison said bluntly. We've avoided immediate escalation, but this was never about forcing a military confrontation. It was about testing our systems and responses. And have they learned what they wanted to know? Harrison considered. They know Sentinel failed. They know we implemented contingency measures. But they don't yet know if we've identified the vulnerability or how we'll adapt our intelligence operations going forward. So what's your recommendation? Transparency to a point, Harrison replied. Acknowledge publicly that we've identified technical issues in certain automated systems and have implemented enhanced human-machine integration protocols. Mitchell frowned. That's admitting weakness. It's demonstrating adaptability, Harrison countered, and sending a clear message. They didn't catch us as flat-footed as they hoped. Before Mitchell could respond, alarms sounded across the crisis center, displays lit up with urgent notifications. What now? Mitchell demanded. Lieutenant Chen rushed over. Sir, Sentinel is back online, but it's generating conflict probabilities of 89%. That's impossible, Everett protested, joining them. The Chinese fleet positioning doesn't justify that assessment. Harrison moved quickly to the main Sentinel interface. It's not assessing current positioning. It's processing historical data from before the crash and projecting forward as if no adjustments occur. The system doesn't recognize that the situation evolved while it was offline, Everett realized. Exactly, Harrison confirmed. It's creating a false continuity based on incomplete data. Mitchell grasped the implications immediately. The president will see these assessments. We need to implement the hybrid override now, Harrison insisted. Before automated protocols trigger escalatory responses. The hybrid system hasn't been fully tested, Everett warned. Neither was Sentinel, apparently, Harrison replied sharply. Mitchell, this is precisely the scenario I warned about 4 years ago. Over-reliance on systems that can't recognize their own limitations. The general hesitated only briefly. Do it. Harrison nodded to Chen, who initiated the integration protocol. They'd developed. The crisis center displays flickered, then stabilized with a new interface showing both Sentinel's algorithmic assessment and the human intelligence team's parallel analysis. Sentinel shows 89% conflict probability. Harrison noted, human analysis indicates 23% based on actual fleet positioning and communications. The hybrid assessment weighs both inputs and calculates 41% with significant uncertainty factors. That's a wide divergence, Mitchell observed. Yes, Harrison agreed. Which is exactly what decision-makers need, to see the full range of possibility rather than false precision. One of Mitchell's aides rushed in. Sir, the President is requesting immediate clarification on the conflicting intelligence assessments. Mitchell looked at Harrison. It's your show now, Colonel. Explain to the Commander-in-Chief why his $12 billion system might be wrong. Harrison straightened his uniform. With pleasure, sir. While waiting for the video conference with the President, Harrison made a series of calls to former contacts throughout the Indo-Pacific region, retired intelligence officers, diplomats, and military attaches who had personal relationships with their Chinese counterparts. Sir, Lieutenant Park said, after Harrison finished his third call, may I ask what you're doing? The briefing starts in 20 minutes. Gathering intelligence. Sentinel can't, Harrison replied. Human networks built on decades of personal relationships. What have you learned? Harrison gestured for Park to sit. Admiral Zhao's former executive officer now teaches at their Naval Command College. According to my contact who guest lectures, there Zhao was recently passed over for promotion to fleet commander, a position he was widely expected to receive. Political falling out, Park suggested. Perhaps, or he's being tested, Harrison mused. This operation could be Zhao's chance to redeem himself by demonstrating Chinese technical superiority over American systems. Park considered this. That would explain the precision of the operation and the careful avoidance of actual provocation. It's a performance designed to impress Beijing's leadership. Exactly, Harrison agreed. Understanding Zhao's personal motivations gives us insight that Sentinel could never calculate. Lieutenant Chen joined them with a tablet. Sir, I've been analyzing communication patterns between Zhao's fleet and Beijing. There's something interesting in the transmission timing. She displayed a chart showing communication intervals. These spikes don't align with standard reporting protocols. They follow Beijing's civil service work schedules. Harrison studied the pattern. They're reporting to bureaucrats, not military command. The Science and Technology Commission, Chen suggested. They oversee China's military AI development, so this entire exercise could be a technology demonstration, Harrison concluded. Not a military operation but a proof of concept for their own AI systems. As they assembled these insights, Dr. Everett approached with a concerned expression. Colonel, Sentinel is now generating contradictory assessments. The primary algorithm maintains high conflict probability, but secondary analysis modules are detecting the inconsistencies we programmed into the hybrid system. It's confused, Harrison said. Essentially, yes, Everett confirmed. The system is designed to reconcile contradictory data points, but it can't when the contradiction comes from its own analytical framework. Isn't that dangerous? Park asked. No, Harrison replied. It's progress. A system that recognizes its own limitations is far more useful than one that generates false certainty. General Mitchell arrived to escort them to the secure conference room. The President has the National Security Council assembled. You have 10 minutes to explain why we should trust your assessment over Sentinels. Harrison gathered his notes and the insights from his team. That's 5 minutes more than I need. In the conference room, Harrison faced a wall of skeptical expressions from America's senior leadership. The President, a former tech executive himself, looked particularly doubtful. "Colonel Harrison," he began, "I'm told you believe our multi-bit AI system is fundamentally misinterpreting the situation in the Taiwan Strait. That's a bold claim from someone who's been retired for 4 years." "Mr. President," Harrison replied, "Sentinel excels at processing data but fails at understanding human motivation. Our analysis incorporates Admiral Zhao's personal circumstances, Beijing's bureaucratic politics, and cultural factors that algorithms simply can't quantify, such as the timing of this operation coincides with internal leadership evaluations in China's military technology sector. The communication pattern suggests this is as much a technology demonstration as a military exercise showing their capability to compromise our systems while testing our non-automated responses." The president leaned forward. "You're suggesting this entire crisis is essentially a Chinese performance review?" "At its core, yes," Harrison confirmed, "with significant geopolitical implications, but not immediate military threat." The president studied Harrison thoughtfully. "That's either brilliant insight or elaborate justification for our outdated approach." "The intelligence speaks for itself, Mr. President," Harrison replied, "and I believe it's time we recognize that true intelligence requires both human and machine components. Working in partnership rather than competition." Dr. Everett's team worked through the night to implement the hybrid oversight model Harrison had proposed. By morning, the Sentinel was operating with a fundamentally new architecture, its powerful data processing capabilities now augmented with human analytical oversight. "The integration is holding," Everett reported, dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. "Sentinel is incorporating the human analytical inputs as weighted factors rather than treating them as anomalous data points." Harrison nodded, reviewing the system's latest assessment. "The conflict probability has stabilized at 35%, much closer to reality. But still higher than your team's 23% assessment," Everett noted. "Which is appropriate," Harrison replied. "There is genuine uncertainty. The point isn't to eliminate all risk assessment but to present a more accurate range of possibilities." Lieutenant Park approached with fresh satellite imagery. "Chinese vessels have begun a phased withdrawal from their forward positions, sir. They're maintaining the weather justification, but the pattern suggests a deliberate de-escalation. They've concluded their demonstration," Harrison observed. "They gathered the data they needed about our response capabilities." General Mitchell joined them, looking cautiously optimistic. "The president has authorized our approach, Colonel. Your hybrid model will remain operational while a comprehensive review of Sentinel is conducted." "And the backdoor vulnerability Lieutenant Chen discovered?" Harrison asked. "Being investigated at the highest levels," Mitchell assured him, "though I'm told certain aspects may lead to politically sensitive areas." Harrison understood the implication. Someone with significant influence had either allowed or facilitated the compromise of Sentinel. "That investigation would likely encounter resistance," Sir Chen interrupted. "Sentinel is flagging a new communication pattern, multiple encrypted transmissions from Admiral Zhao's flagship directly to Beijing bypassing normal chain of command." Harrison moved to her terminal. "Can we decrypt?" "Not fully," Chen admitted, "but the transmission patterns match what we'd expect for detailed operation reports. They're conducting their own after-action review, which means this phase of their operation is concluding," Harrison noted. "They're compiling what they learned." Dr. Everett looked troubled. "We need to complete a comprehensive security audit of all Pentagon systems. If they compromised Sentinel, they may have access to other networks already underway," Mitchell confirmed. "The president has authorized a full cybersecurity review across all military intelligence platforms." Harrison turned to the map display, where Chinese vessel positions were being updated in real time. The fleet was dispersing in a standard post pattern, maintaining the fiction that this had been nothing more than routine training complicated by weather conditions. "They'll be analyzing what they learned about our contingency capabilities," Harrison said. "How we function when our primary systems fail. Who makes decisions. How quickly we adapt. What backup processes we implement." "Valuable intelligence," Mitchell acknowledged. "For both sides," Harrison countered. "We've learned about their willingness to conduct sophisticated system attacks rather than direct military confrontation, and about our own vulnerabilities." The general sighed. 4 years ago, you warned us this could happen. I should have listened. We all wanted to believe in the perfect system," Harrison replied. "Technology offers compelling promises, certainty in an uncertain world, consistency without human error, but it can't replace human judgment," Mitchell concluded. "It shouldn't try to," Harrison agreed. The future isn't artificial intelligence replacing human intelligence. It's augmented intelligence, the best of both, working in concert. Everett, who had been listening, nodded slowly. That's not what we originally designed Sentinel to be, but it's what it should have been all along. Harrison allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the best innovations come from failure, not success. Speaking of innovation, Mitchell said, the Secretary of Defense wants to discuss your future role once this situation fully resolves. I believe the term special advisor was mentioned. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me my job back? Something better, Mitchell replied. The chance to rebuild our intelligence approach from the ground up. As the immediate crisis abated, Harrison recognized an opportunity to convert tactical de-escalation into strategic dialogue. His research into Admiral Zhao's background had revealed something. Sentinel would never have flagged the Chinese commander had studied at the U.S. Naval War College as a young officer, forming professional relationships with several Americans who are now senior leaders. General Harrison proposed to Mitchell, we have a unique opening to establish direct communication with Admiral Zhao. One of his war college classmates is now Admiral Williams at Pacific Command. Mitchell considered this unofficial communication. The State Department would have concerns. Not diplomatic negotiation, Harrison clarified. Professional military to military contact. A courtesy communication acknowledging the weather challenges both fleets navigated successfully. A face-saving acknowledgement that we see through their exercise without publicly calling them out. Mitchell translated. Exactly. It signals awareness, without escalation. After brief consultation with the National Security Council, approval came through. Harrison helped draft the message, carefully balancing professional courtesy with subtle indication of American awareness. 6 hours later, a response arrived from Admiral Zhao, equally professional and equally nuanced. Beneath the formal language about maritime safety protocols lay a clear message. The Chinese admiral was acknowledging the tacit understanding between professional military officers. Regardless of political tensions, Lieutenant Park, who had helped analyze the response, looked thoughtful. He's creating distance between the military operation and whoever ordered the cyber attack on Sentinel, and providing potential opening for future communication, Harrison agreed. This is how actual stability is maintained. Professionals on both sides, establishing boundaries that political leadership often can't articulate directly. General Mitchell shared the exchange with the Secretary of Defense, who approved continuing the limited communication channel. It wasn't peace negotiations or formal diplomacy, but it created space for preventing dangerous misunderstandings. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Chen continued investigating the Sentinel breach. She approached Harrison with new findings. Sir, I've traced the backdoor access to a development server in Northern Virginia, but the trail goes cold there. However, there's something else. The vulnerability was documented in an internal security review 8 months ago but was marked deferred for remediation. Who authorized the deferral? Harrison asked. Chen hesitated. The electronic signature belongs to Undersecretary Vaughn. Harrison recognized the name, a political appointee, with strong ties to the defense contractors who had built Sentinel. Mitchell needs to see this, Harrison said. There's more, Chen continued. System logs show regular access to the development server from an IP address associated with Meridian Defense Group, the primary contractor for Sentinel. Harrison noted, this is moving beyond technical failure into potential corruption or espionage. What do we do? Chen asked. We continue building our case methodically, Harrison replied. This isn't just about one crisis or one system failure anymore. It's about the integrity of our entire defense intelligence architecture. As they compiled the evidence, word came that the Chinese fleet had fully withdrawn to its normal operational areas. The immediate crisis was over, but the implications remained profound. In the Pentagon briefing room, Harrison presented the final assessment to military leadership. The Chinese achieved their primary objective, demonstrating their ability to compromise our AI systems at a critical moment. But they've also revealed their own approach to future conflicts, meaning asked the Chief of Naval Operations. They're prioritizing system disruption over direct military confrontation, Harrison explained, fighting our technology rather than our forces. It's warfare in the gray zone between peace and open conflict, and our response strategy, the Air Force Chief of Staff asked. Resilience through integration, Harrison answered, not abandoning advanced technology, but ensuring it operates in partnership with human judgment. Sentinel shouldn't be autonomous, it should be collaborative. General Mitchell closed the briefing with a significant announcement. The Secretary of Defense has authorized the establishment of a new Integrated Intelligence Division. Colonel Harrison will be returning from retirement to lead it. 3 days after the crisis began, the situation in the Taiwan Strait had returned to normal operational patterns. The Chinese media reported on successful naval exercises conducted despite challenging weather conditions. American media carried limited coverage of routine monitoring of Chinese activities. Both nations maintained the diplomatic fiction that nothing unusual had occurred. Behind the scenes, however, significant changes were underway. Harrison found himself in the Secretary of Defense's private office, seated across from the woman who held America's military authority second only to the President. Colonel Secretary Vance began. Your handling of this situation has forced us to reconsider some fundamental assumptions about our intelligence modernization program. I appreciate that acknowledgement, Madam Secretary. Don't get too appreciative yet, she replied with a thin smile. $12 billion of congressional funding doesn't pivot on a dime. What you're proposing, this hybrid human-machine intelligence model, represents a significant departure from the fully automated vision we've been selling to Congress for years. But a necessary one, Harrison countered. Perhaps, she conceded. The forensic analysis of Sentinel's compromise is concerning, particularly the potential involvement of American contractors and possibly even officials. Harrison remained silent, letting her continue. The President has authorized a classified review of the entire program, she said, including the contract structures, security protocols, and oversight mechanisms. It will be conducted with extreme discretion because of the political implications, Harrison noted. Because of the national security implications, she corrected firmly. If what Lieutenant Chen discovered is accurate, we're looking at a vulnerability that extends far beyond Sentinel itself. Harrison nodded. The same development methodology was used across multiple defense systems. If one has a backdoor, exactly, the Secretary confirmed. Which brings me to your role going forward. General Mitchell suggests you should lead the overhaul of our intelligence integration processes. The President agrees. And you, Madam Secretary? She studied him carefully. I was on the committee that approved your retirement 4 years ago. Colonel, I thought you were being obstinate, clinging to outdated methodologies because you feared change. And now I recognize you were raising legitimate concerns that we should have addressed then, she admitted. So yes, I want you to lead this effort, but with conditions. I'm listening. This isn't about dismantling our technological investments. It's about enhancing them with appropriate human oversight. I need your commitment that you won't use this as an opportunity to roll back digital transformation. I've never opposed technology, Madam Secretary, Harrison said. Only its misapplication. The hybrid model Dr. Everett and I developed actually advances Sentinel's capabilities by addressing its fundamental limitations. She nodded, seemingly satisfied. One more thing. The investigation into who compromised Sentinel will likely lead to some powerful people. I need to know you'll follow the evidence wherever it leads, regardless of rank or political affiliation. That's never been a problem for me, Harrison assured her. So I've heard, she said with a wry smile. Very well. Effective immediately. You're reinstated to active duty with the rank of Brigadier General, reporting directly to General Mitchell. The President will announce the formation of the Integrated Intelligence Division next week. As Harrison prepared to leave, the Secretary added, one last thing, General Harrison, what happened in the Strait was likely just a test run. We should expect more sophisticated attacks on our systems in the future. Yes, Madam Secretary, Harrison agreed, which is why we need to evolve beyond the false choice between human and artificial intelligence. Our adversaries are already deploying hybrid approaches. We can't afford to fall behind. Then make sure we don't, she replied simply. As Harrison left the Pentagon that evening, he found Lieutenant now Captain Chan waiting near his car. Congratulations on the promotion, sir, she said with a smile. Both yours and mine. Well deserved, Captain, he replied. I hope you'll consider joining the new division. Already requested transfer, she confirmed. Someone needs to keep explaining technology to you old school types. Harrison laughed, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in 4 years. The future of intelligence isn't about machines replacing humans, Captain. It's about finding the right partnership between them. Exactly what I've been saying since I joined your team, sir, she replied with a grin. Welcome to the 21st century. Better late than never. 6 months later, Harrison stood before a classroom of intelligence officers in the newly established Integrated Intelligence Training Center. The facility occupied a renovated wing of the Pentagon, symbolically positioned between the traditional intelligence directorates and the advanced technology divisions. Intelligence is not data, Harrison explained to the attentive faces before him. Data is what happened. Intelligence is understanding why it happened and what might happen next. Among the students sat officers from every service branch, alongside civilian analysts and technical specialists. The integrated approach extended to personnel as well as methodology. Sentinel and systems like it excel at processing what happened, Harrison continued. The human mind excels at interpreting why and projecting what's next. Neither is sufficient alone. Together they're formidable. Captain Park, now one of the program's lead instructors, took over the technical portion of the briefing. His transformation, from a AI devotee to integration advocate, had been remarkable. The crisis had fundamentally shifted his perspective on technological dependence. The hybrid framework doesn't just add human oversight to automated systems, Park explained, displaying the architectural diagrams. It fundamentally redesigns how the systems process information, incorporating contextual understanding and intentionality as core analytical components. After the session, Dr. Everett joined Harrison in his office. Their initially adversarial relationship had evolved into genuine collaboration over the past months. The latest simulation results are impressive, Everett reported. The integrated system identified 94% of the deception scenarios we programmed, compared to 37% for the original Sentinel architecture. And the false positive rate, Harrison asked. Down to 12% from 45%. Everett replied, still room for improvement, but trending in the right direction. Harrison nodded, satisfied. How's the security audit progressing? Everett's expression tightened. 3 more systems identified with similar vulnerabilities, all traced back to the same development team at Meridian. The investigation into Sentinel's compromise had expanded significantly, revealing a pattern of security bypasses implemented across multiple defense systems. Whether through incompetence, corruption, or deliberate sabotage remained unclear, but the implications were profound. The Justice Department has impaneled a grand jury, Everett continued. Under-Secretary Vaughn resigned last week, citing personal reasons, and Meridian, Harrison asked, their defense contracts are under review. Several executives have been placed on administrative leave. Harrison nodded. The political fallout had been carefully managed. No public scandals, no dramatic arrests, but a quiet, thorough housecleaning within the defense establishment. Captain Chen entered with the latest intelligence summary. Sir, our assessment of Chinese military AI development suggests they're pursuing a similar integrated approach. Their recent exercises show human command elements maintaining veto authority over automated systems. They learned from their own operation, Harrison noted. They saw both Sentinel's vulnerability and the effectiveness of our human response. Mutual learning, Chen suggested. Maybe that reduces risk on both sides. Perhaps, Harrison agreed. Technical limitations become more apparent when actively tested. Both sides now better understand the dangers of over-reliance. Later that day, Harrison met with General Mitchell to review the program's progress. Congress has approved full funding for the next fiscal year, Mitchell reported. Your testimony about the Taiwan Strait incident was apparently quite persuasive. I simply presented the facts, Harrison replied. AI systems remain powerful tools, but tools nonetheless. They require human judgment to be truly effective. Mitchell nodded. The President is pleased with the results so far. The approach has already improved our assessments in several ongoing situations. And Admiral Shao, Harrison asked, still in command of his fleet. Mitchell confirmed. The professional communication channel remains open through Admiral Williams. Limited but useful. Harrison allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. In 6 short months they had fundamentally reshaped the Pentagon's approach to intelligence, not by rejecting technology, but by finding its proper place alongside human insight. We still have much to do, Harrison acknowledged. Integration isn't just about systems and processes. It's about organizational culture valuing both technical expertise and human judgment. One crisis at a time, James, Mitchell said with a slight smile. You've already accomplished more than most thought possible. We've made a good start, Harrison agreed. But our adversaries are adapting too. This isn't a problem we solve once and for all. It's an ongoing evolution. Then we'll keep evolving, Mitchell replied simply. 1 year to the day after the 3 a.m. call that had pulled him from retirement, Brigadier General James Harrison stood at the podium in the Pentagon's main briefing room. Before him sat military leaders, intelligence officials, congressional representatives, and technical specialists from across the defense establishment. The Integrated Intelligence Initiative represents not a rejection of technological advancement, but its maturation, Harrison explained. We've moved beyond the false dichotomy of human versus machine intelligence to recognize that each has strengths the other lacks. On screens behind him, data illustrated the program's accomplishments: improved threat assessments, reduced false positives, faster response times to emerging situations, and crucially, greater resilience against deception and system compromise. The Taiwan Strait incident taught us a valuable lesson, he continued. Technology without human judgment is vulnerable. Human analysis without technological support is overwhelmed. Together they create something greater than the sum of their parts. In the audience, Harrison spotted familiar faces: Captain Chen, now his deputy director; Captain Park, heading the training division; Dr. Everett, leading technical integration; and General Mitchell, whose initial crisis call had set everything in motion. We face adversaries who are sophisticated, adaptive, and increasingly focused on attacking our systems rather than our forces, Harrison said. The battlefield extends into cyberspace, information networks, and decision processes. Our response must be equally sophisticated, not just better technology, but better integration of technology with human insight. As the presentation concluded, and the audience dispersed to breakout sessions, Secretary Vance approached Harrison. Impressive results, General, she acknowledged. The President is considering expanding the integrated model to other departments: Homeland Security, State, even Treasury. The principles apply broadly, Harrison agreed. Any complex decision environment benefits from structured integration of human and machine capabilities. And the investigation? She asked more quietly. Ongoing, Harrison replied. 3 indictments so far, all at Meridian. The technical team has identified and remediated the backdoor vulnerabilities in all critical systems. She nodded, satisfied. Your reinstatement has proven fortunate for national security, General, though I suspect your retirement plans have been thoroughly disrupted. Harrison smiled slightly. Some disruptions are worth embracing, Madam Secretary. Later in his office, Harrison took a rare moment of reflection. On his desk sat a framed photo of his original intelligence team from before Sentinel, including a younger Lieutenant Chen. Beside it lay his retirement letter from 4 years earlier, preserved as a reminder of the path that had led here. A notification appeared on his secure terminal: a potential anomaly in the South China Sea, flagged by the Integrated System for Human Review. The alert wasn't from Sentinel alone, but from the hybrid architecture that now incorporated both machine processing and human analytical frameworks. Captain Chen appeared at his door. Sir, we're assessing unusual vessel movements near the Paracel Islands. Sentinel flags it as routine, but the integrated framework detects subtle inconsistencies with historical patterns. Harrison nodded, already rising. Have Captain Park assemble the analytical team. Alert Admiral Williams to prepare for possible communication with his Chinese counterpart. Already done, sir, Chen confirmed. Dr. Everett is examining the technical data streams for manipulation. As they walked briskly to the Situation Room, Harrison reflected on how far they'd come. A year ago, such a situation would have been handled exclusively by automated systems until crisis point. Now, human judgment was integrated from the first indication of anomaly. The technology hadn't been abandoned. In fact, Sentinel's processing capabilities had been enhanced. But it no longer operated in isolation, no longer claimed infallibility, no longer replaced human judgment, but augmented it. In the Situation Room, Harrison surveyed his team: technical specialists and intelligence analysts working side by side, neither dominating the other, each contributing their unique capabilities to a comprehensive assessment. What do we know? He asked simply. As detailed reports flowed in, technical data alongside human insights, probability analyses beside cultural context, Harrison felt a profound sense of purpose. This was intelligence as it should be, technology and humanity, in partnership, each making the other stronger. The crisis that had begun with a 3 a.m. phone call had come full circle. The army had retired him for technology, then called him back when that technology failed. Now he was building something better than either alone, a true integration of the best of both worlds. Let's get to work, he said.